Mike Cavanaugh, and this is another edition of Cavanaugh's Corner, the labor talk show here in southern Maine on public access television. I'm joined this afternoon by a number of guests. This is Cavanaugh's crowd this afternoon. I'm real happy to have been joined by folks from the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, and we're going to be talking about the story of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, and particularly the recent union victory at the Hannaford Brothers warehouse in South Portland. And for introductory purposes, let me just start from my left. Bill Danio, Bill is the assistant to the National Director of Organizing for the Food and Commercial Workers Union.
Yes, sir.
And up from Washington, D.C. today,
Yes.
Is that right? Okay, great, Bill. And to my left is Dennis Norton. Dennis is the president of the local union here in South Portland. That's Local 1292. And it's primarily the story of your local that we're going to be talking about today. And also your local. This is Bill Labreque. Bill is the vice president. Bob. Cut. Bob Labreque. This is an informal. This is my old friend. My old friend Bob Labreque. Oh, Bob. Bob is a local guy here from Biddeford and is the vice president of Local 1292 at Hannaford Brothers. And Jim Lee is the executive assistant to the New England Regional Director.
Glad to be here.
Title close to that, and up from Massachusetts, and part of the union's team that has been involved in the organizing efforts and the affiliation efforts over here in South Portland. So, introductions out of the way, let me just start by explaining to our viewers that I'm not going to have a lot to say about this because I don't know much more of this story than most of you do at the moment. But there have been a few things in the mainstream press in the last few weeks having to do with the fact that an independent union, which was called the
Northeast Freight Handlers Independent Union.
Northeast Freight Handlers Independent Union in South Portland, which represent the workers at Hannaford Brothers, was in the process of considering whether to join with a large national, actually international union, the UFCW. And as of last week, the vote was taken. The local union did affiliate with the UFCW. That's why everybody's here today, and we're here to tell you we welcome having you guys as part of the AFL-CIO, and we're real anxious for you to tell the story. So somebody needs to start explaining a little bit, and maybe defer to our president here, the local union president. Explain to us a little bit, if you would, please, Dennis. What's the history? How long have you worked there at Hannaford? How many people? Tell us about it a little bit.
I've worked at Hannaford's probably 9 years. I've been president of what was the Northeast Freight Handlers for approximately 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
We represent about 275 workers in the warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
They supply the groceries to the store. They load the trucks. They unload the trucks. Everything you see on the shelf comes from our distribution center in most of Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we do. When I got involved in this, the labor movement, probably 6 years ago, we were a very small independent.
Mm-hmm.
Then we were known as the Northeast Freight Handlers Association.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a ragtag bunch at best. We didn't have a lot of organization, but over the years we've seemed to progress
Mm-hmm.
to where we feel we represent people well, and to a point where you need good, accurate representation.
Right.
And get some good contracts from people.
Uh-huh.
We've gotten to a point now where we felt, if you're familiar with Hannafords, they've been just booming over the last 6 or 7 or 8 years, same time period. And to keep up with $1 billion company at the negotiating table is something that's much more beyond what we could do as an independent union. With work a full-time 40-hour job on the third shift, and Bob worked the day shift.
Right.
Doing it out of our houses was a hard task. So
Sure.
we recognized the need to get some resources.
Okay.
To better represent people, we started working with the UFCW.
Okay, and so you've been there working 9 years in the warehouse, and the kinds of jobs, forklift drivers and stockers and pickers and...
Freight selector to loader to frozen food worker.
Okay,
So,
all right. And my old friend Bob, how long have you been there, Bob?
I've been there about 10 and a half years.
Okay.
Doing basically the same type of work, from picker all the way to loader and machine operator, let downs, putaways. It's been a decent career so far.
Okay, so what is it, I'm just curious now, you guys have been working there about 10 years each year. What is it that got you actively involved? You mentioned maybe 6 years ago. I don't know how long it is you've been involved with the former independent union, but in both of your cases, what are the reasons? Why did you get involved in trying to represent your co-workers and building a union?
Well, from my perspective, I'm basically a person, you give me an opportunity to speak and get in front of people, I jump right on it. So I made, at this point, what I think was a good mistake, probably 6 years ago, there was a vacancy on my shift for a shift steward. And they approached me, being the newest guy in the shift, to say, hey, would you like to do it? I said, sure. And I ended up here.
Okay.
There was a lot of opportunity to do good things, and that's what attracted me.
Okay. And,
Yeah, basically, same reasons. I've always been involved with my work, okay, in one way or another. Depending on how things went, if they didn't necessarily go the way I thought they would, I'd get involved and speak up. I get involved also at the same time as Dennis did, for basically the same reasons. We didn't know what it would come out to like it is today, but we have come quite a long way.
Okay, all right. So now you guys for a number of years worked as part of an independent union. There are not a lot of independent unions around, and I don't know what the long history of it is or how relevant that is right now. So if you think that's important, you should tell us. What do you know about how long has the independent union existed there?
Well, they've had some sort of organization there for 40 years or better. The independent started to come into its own probably 12 to 15 years ago. And, you know, there was a bunch of guys who'd get together, negotiate a contract, and handle grievances and complaints. Then over the last 6 to 7 years, we've really come right to the forefront. You know, do a lot of, we offer not only the grievance handling and contract negotiating stuff, but we also develop some systems to help our members out, such as hardship grants and things like that.
I see. Okay.
Dennis, perhaps interesting, a point to be made, and it was conversation that you and I were having this morning. I was curious, both interested and excited about the answer to it, when we were speaking of the need to affiliate the former independent with the international union. One of the primary reasons was at one point in time, one juncture, the workers, the members of the independent, for a long period of time felt comfortable with the representation that they were receiving from the independent union. But as time went on, as the corporation grew, as business got bigger, in order to deal with the larger scale problems, and to maintain, if you will, proper representation, you had to seek outside assistance, an equalization, someone that could deal on that same level, or play on that same playing field as the larger corporation, and that was one of the reasons.
Oh, exactly. When I took over 6 years ago, we were the only distribution center in the Hannaford chain. They opened a identical facility to us in upstate New York, in Skodak, just outside of Albany. And that kind of put us in a whole new ballgame. We were the only warehouse on the block, so we kind of had a hold on things. Now we have some healthy competition for jobs between the two facilities. And like Bill mentions, with that comes a lot of expertise that we don't necessarily have or have the resources to get. That motivates us to go to UFCW, you know, to find out different patterns in the grocery industry. Benefit is, like I said, they've doubled their business in the last 8 years. So
I can attest to that. I mean, I drop a certain amount of money every week at Shop and Save, and I'm sure we're helping to build that business. And it's, I don't know what the number is. You say you got 275 people now. How has that grown in the last few years?
Well, actually, it's a decline, and that's another reason
that right?
We went to the UFCW. It seems to be a trend out there now with the economy and just business in general, moving to part-time workforces.
Yes.
When New York opened, we lost probably 20% of our business to the New York facility. And with that, we didn't see any rise in membership. They increased the part-time workforce, which we don't have in our membership. So we probably have actually decreased 25 to 30 full-time jobs in that facility. And that's definitely a trend we don't want to continue.
Okay. Jim, let me ask you now, you've been working up here locally with these guys for some period of time, I guess, and helping to put this affiliation through, and so the guy on the scene?
Yeah, it began about 2.5 years ago when I first met Dennis. In the last couple of years, we've had some success with another independent union representing the Shaw's chain that operated in almost a similar situation. For years, they operated in Bridgewater, Massachusetts, the only facility for Shaw's. They opened a second facility here in Wells, I think about 10 years ago now. And that independent union also represented stores in the southern part of Massachusetts. And at one time were known as Brockton Public Markets, then merged with the Shaw's chain. And about, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago now, they were bought by Jane Sainsbury of England. And they could see a change in the way the company treated them. We affiliated them back in July of 1991, and as a result in conversations, there had been some talk between the fellows here at NFIU and Shaw's. So we made, we received a phone call to meet with Dennis and see what could be developed. And 2 years ago, we began the campaign. We had an attempt at affiliation and just failed to reach the change or we needed in their bylaws. For the last 2 years, the NFIU people have been trying to put the thing back on track, and with some opposition, I might say. And we finally able to put together last weekend.
Okay. You mentioned opposition, and I, like I said at the outset, I don't know really much about this story, and I don't want to be heading down the wrong track, but where was the company in all of this? To what extent did the Hannaford brothers shop and save supermarkets, to what extent did they inject themselves in this whole issue?
Well, from my perspective, they went in with both feet, right up to their neck. We've been, we voted Sunday night to affiliate, so this is all new to us, but the last 3 weeks have been extremely heavy. We've had from the CEO all the way down through the whole company, we've had quite a bit of attention in the warehouse. They've actively campaigned against us. They had all kinds of literature, propaganda, vote no buttons and all this. You know, they hit people pretty hard.
So let me make sure I understand this straight now. This is not a representation election so much as this was an internal union affiliation. You know, will our union, independent union, affiliate with the national UFCW union? Part of me says, so why does the company have anything to say about that?
Well,
That's a
you would
great
get the
question.
argument from us. That's good.
Great question.
You know, based on your experience, Mike, you understand. That was the approach the company took. We tried to keep it on a basis that it was an internal matter that the company should stay out of. Naturally, the company felt that they had a vested interest in what happened, and I'd say their tactics were similar to what you'd find in a representation situation. When you know, sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. Here they waged a pretty difficult campaign, but the men stuck through it, and they were successful in the final analysis. And hopefully, the campaign is over, and we go back. That this local union goes back to doing what it does on a daily basis, and that's representing the workers to the best of their ability. And any hard feelings will be soothed, and that they'll move on to a good, honest relationship.
You know, to expand on your remark, Jim, about a company having a vested interest, that vested interest, as we all well know, it in fact is I don't want to say a control, but having influence over, having the ability to influence the independent union was much more probable than the company's ability to even attempt to have a control or influence over major organizations such as the UFCW. Companies certainly would prefer to have representation of their workers by an independent, someone that they're much more apt, much more able, much more capable to manipulate to some degree. That's not criticism, open criticism of any independent union. Certainly there are fine independent unions, and certainly there are some independent unions that can quite effectively represent a workforce. But for the most part, I think it would be a consensus of anyone sitting at this table that for the most part, where you're dealing with a major corporation such as Hannaford, you need a organization that is equal, if you will. Not only in structure and numbers, but finances, resources, the entire run, the entire 9 yards. The vested interest is a control. Hannaford wanted to keep control over that workforce, over the membership of the small independent union. By the affiliation of the independent with the UFCW, Hannaford has lost the ability to manipulate or control or have an effect of either.
Right, it makes sense. I mean, I think your point is quite right about companies wanting to have control. Certainly, I think most companies would prefer to have no union to deal with, independent or not. And as we all know, around the state of Maine, frankly, around the United States, most companies are enjoying that union-free environment that they've worked so hard to achieve over the years. And now here, I mean, what's significant about this is you guys are bucking the trend. I mean, clearly the trend in the last, 15 years or better probably has been, a decline of union membership. We're not organizing as much as we used to. I know there are exceptions certainly, but as a general rule, the percentage of union membership is going down, union power is declining, et cetera, et cetera. And the popular view is that, well, people, unions were great back then when they were needed. I hear this all the time, unions were great in their day, but now we have a new environment and we don't need them anymore. Did you hear some of that in your campaign? Did the company sort of suggest that this
Well,
was?
of course, this year in the UFCW, we are, right now, we claim to be the largest private sector union out there. Organizing is not something that we don't do. We do it on a pretty regular basis and have over the years. Our predecessor unions prior to the big merger that formed UFCW, the Amalgamated Meat Cutters and Retail Clerks International Association, merged in 1979. Both unions had a long history of organizing that has continued ever since 1979. So we continue to organize to the best of our ability. We're fortunate in some instances that we're dealing with some pretty successful companies also. There's no job you're not going to organize people, because that's happened in this state, as you all know. So that from that standpoint, organizing isn't everything, but it's our thing. We do it on a regular basis. The other point I'd like to make is that this independent union waged contract negotiations with this company for something like 37, 38 meetings. They were able to negotiate a contract that when the final analysis that was ratified by the membership in support of their leadership, not so much the merits of the contract, but in support of their leadership, because they realized where they were at, because of some of the things that Bill alluded to, that you're not going to get too far with a pillow. And the strength that they demonstrated was outstanding, because almost 100% turnout. I'm sure in your experience today, if you can get union members to attend a meeting with all the other things they have to do, too many of our people, because of short time, because of layoffs, what have you, working 2 jobs, wives are out working, spouses that are supporting spouses, so to get people to come to a meeting anymore is unbelievable. And this group here, in all the contract proposal meetings, had as high as 70%. The participation the other night was almost 90% of those eligible. They have a provision in their bylaws that allow for absentee voting, which allowed more people to vote. So from a standpoint of a democratic organization, they certainly meet all those requirements. And I think that's the most important thing here, is that we've found as we've worked with independent unions, and as you know, that's one of the objectives of any AFL associate, to try to organize within their jurisdiction, any independent union. And my experience with independent unions, both here and in Massachusetts, with 2 of the largest food chains in New England, you might want to say, are very active, very intelligent, work hard, and have developed into some pretty successful organizers within our group. And we've been able to use that talent in other programs throughout the country.
Well, I'd be interested in learning a little bit about that, and maybe what some of the things you guys might be thinking about, because I mean, here you got a couple of guys who, rank and file guys who came out working in the warehouse and developed into what obviously must be, excellent leaders to hold together a campaign like you guys just went through. And I can just imagine what it's like. I mean, I've been through representation organizing drives, and I know what's at stake, and the way companies look at those sorts of things and the way they're willing to fight them. And, it's a real credit to you guys and the other people that you represented, that you were able to, to stick it out through that kind of a campaign. I mean, that's not easy to do. Not many people.
It might be of interest to your listeners is perhaps just an overview of the tactics that were actually, in fact, applied in your situation and your organizing. Some of the conditions, some of the intimidating, if you will, actions of the employer in trying to discourage this independent union from affiliating with what they so direly needed.
That's a good point. I bet a lot of our viewers aren't at all familiar with what goes on in an organizing drive. What's it
Well,
like?
if I could, I think some of their activity was misdirected because from the get-go, our position with this independent union was the same as any local union in our organization. We have several hundred. That the local union would determine what action it wished to take, and we would be there to assist them. Naturally, the company's attitude was that we're looking for the big prize. We're a retail union. We have over 800,000 members in retail, and they're sitting out there with over 100 stores, 14,000 employees employed in those stores, and that was our target. That's what we're looking for, okay? And that's the first things from the truth. If those people are ready, they'll come to us. That's how I became involved in this union many, many years ago in the great state of Maine, in Portland, Maine. As a matter of fact, I was a volunteer organizer for AMP, and we organized, and no one ever thought 119 stores in AMP would organize. It was done over a 2.5-year period. This group here had one major problem. That was a competition for their jobs in New York State with another warehouse. And their first objective, they told us, was to organize their competition, which was internal, okay? And that was the direction they wanted to go in. And it's always been the direction they wanted to go in. The stores are another day. Hopefully the stores will be organized someday. That's our goal, and actually to organize everybody in retail. That's our mission. But I think that was part of their direction was aimed at what we were looking for, and they forgot what the membership of this union was looking for. That was to improve the situation that they found themselves in.
Okay.
Some of the things that tried weighed heavy on the workers' minds in the plant. What were some of the threats or some of the suggestions made by the corporation that you guys dealt with and finally overcame in educating your membership?
I think Jim hit on it accurately. The biggest barrier that we came up against, the company came out very strong, saying, hey, we're in business to compete. We need to, stay competitive. And they saw the ability to do that by best playing the two facilities between each other, New York and South Portland. So the biggest threat that you said to us was, if you guys continue to organize, and in one way they helped themselves, because by inferring that the union would come in, the international would come in and assist us, that it would cost the company money. And to me, that was one of the pluses, because what they were telling me was, okay, we're gonna have some clout at the table, they're gonna have to listen and reason with us. And they tried to take the tack, well, that's not gonna happen necessarily. We get along with you guys because you're all from Portland, Maine, and you work in the warehouse and you work hard. If you bring in the outsiders, we may not necessarily continue that relationship. But I think one thing they underestimated, the UFCW, and the agreement we put together to affiliate allows us our own local autonomy. And we have, basically, as we see it, nothing's gonna change other than we have more resources to help us. That was a big boost in our end. But the threatening of, hey, we'll move your work if this happens, was a very big thing to overcome for people. But what it came down to in the end, people realize you just can't work in an environment where the threat is prevalent all the time.
Right.
We get paid well, we work hard, we earn every nickel we make. And it goes beyond that for us at this point. It was a matter of our own personal freedom. Under the law, we can organize, we can express ourselves, and that was attempted to be stifled by different tactics. You mentioned they send letters to our homes, telling our families this is a very serious decision. And when you hit people at the home, when you hit the family, and you threaten your jobs, it makes people, the hair on the back of your neck goes up.
Right. Right.
I think in this particular case, Hannaford's underestimated the people.
And it's interesting. The buzzwords seem to be the words that you were accustomed to hearing during this drive, this organizational drive, was organize, organize, organize. Hannaford's objection to the people organizing. The fact of the matter is, the people were organized. That's the fact of the matter. What Hannaford was objecting to was the people, the organization of the unit collectively coming together to effectively negotiate, not organize, but effectively bargain. Hannaford knew with the organization such as the UFCW, them being under the umbrella, that the expertise was there, the ability was there, the departments, the avenue, the personnel were there to guide them.
Sure.
Is that a fair summation?
Exactly, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, okay, we realized, especially 2 years ago, okay, that we needed these outside resources. Basically, our independent had gone as far as it could go, in our opinion. And we went out, actively sucked out the UFCW, and they came to our assistance. The resources they offer in health, pension plans, wages, contracts in the area, ergonomics, a multitude of resources available to us when we go to contract negotiations. That is something that we are very, very much interested in, and we felt we lacked.
Yeah. Now, is it the case that you mentioned letters to the homes, and I assume that there were meetings held, some kind of captive audience meetings being held by the management people, or I don't know whether, I assume they were represented by somebody, labor lawyers of some sort, or management consultant types who helped to direct the company's activities, but they were, I assume they were meeting with people one-on-one even, right, at the plant or the warehouse?
I mean, it was quite an intensive campaign by the company. They did several things. They had the small captive audience meetings. You know, you were mandated you'll be at this meeting, you'll listen to what we're going to tell you, and you're not necessarily going to be able to ask a lot of questions, but you're going to hear a lot of rhetoric. That happened constantly for at least 1 week. So,
At least.
Yeah.
you know, people in that course of the week, any full-time employee could have had anywhere from 1 to 3 meetings, depending on how lucky or unlucky he was to be there at the time.
Right.
You know, they brought in the part-time people, they brought in the people that aren't even in the union. They had them all sporting vote no buttons and things like that. And just tried to put a tremendous amount of pressure on us as the union leadership.
Right. Now, I'm sure that, you know, these gentlemen have been through organizing drives many times, I'm sure, and I suspect that you're in a position, Jim, probably to let these guys know ahead of time, pretty well scripted out, what the company's going to do, how they're going to go about it, what to expect.
What we tried to do is we met with the officers of this union and the stewards and some of the other activists that we were able to sit down with it, and told them that the company that had been hired by Hannaford Brothers, I don't care to mention their name, but you know they're out of White Plains, New York, and it's Jackson Lewis, and they don't need any more advertising from us.
That's fine. We'll just...
We've made them millionaires, but they'd been here since June of last year, to the best of our knowledge, working their campaign, because they knew eventually, and when the contract expired, that was probably gonna be the time that these fellows would come to us, because that was the history of the other union. So we tried to lay out what we thought would happen. And in response to that, the officers of this union developed a campaign, a fair campaign practices code, and asked us and the company to abide by that code. And basically said, let us make the decision ourselves. We'll reach out to who we wish to reach out to. We don't think either one of you should be out there banging on doors. You shouldn't be sending us letters, captive audience meetings. We'll make available to our members an opportunity to speak to the union, and we're sure the company will make that opportunity too. The National United Food and Commercial Workers Union, my director, Bob Petronell, signed it upon receipt. The company never signed it. The company then went to the newspaper in response to a question, which they said later should have been retracted, but they never asked for it, that their attitude was that it was an internal matter and they wouldn't get involved in it. When the workers questioned them on that, they said, well, you know, we had to say what we had to say. So we anticipated that, but what we were able to do is, working with the local union, they've had enough wisdom and foresight to have a small local union office. We set up a couple of tables and chairs, and had 2 representatives available. It changes shifts during the day when one of the people want to talk to us. That's why we're not talking today, I guess. And we were able to work with those folks if they came over to us. Some of the ones that were dead set against us didn't bother coming. We didn't expect them to. But the company kept working. I mean, they went from the top of the company to the bottom, okay, to Mr. Farrington himself having one-on-one meetings, small group meetings with 7 or 8 people, because that's how important it was to him.
Sure.
You know? So we anticipated that would happen. I think the workers anticipated it. You understand this was the second time they've been through it in less than 2 years. So some of the activity of the company, I think, was not new to them, but it was the same old repetitive stuff.
Right.
And you're right, I've been on a lot of campaigns and I've seen companies do a lot of things. This is the first one in recent memory where they even went to the extent of scheduling overtime all weekend, so they have more opportunity to talk to more people. But as I said earlier, you know, our fight ended, I hope, Sunday night,
Yeah.
as far as this affiliation goes, and we go forward. But I think it's well that people be aware of what happens, that I think the general public has a conception that, you know, first of all, unions are there and people make a decision and they just vote for a union like they vote for the next congressman. And that's not the case, as you all know.
Yeah, that's certainly not the case, and I think it's, you know, it's very important for viewers of this show. We, as I mentioned to you guys before we went on the air, or on the tape here, that we expect this show is seen by viewers in communities really all around Maine, and it's quite likely that most people watching the show haven't been through a union organizing drive. Most people who are members of our union, and I imagine most people members of your union, aren't members because they went through what you guys went through. People were probably fortunate enough to get a job in a union shop, and they take union conditions and contract issues and so on for granted.
Exactly.
And not too many people have had the experience that you've had. And I just think it's real important that you know, viewers understand, you know, what it is we're up against, but that it's not impossible to overcome. You're living proof of the fact
Sure.
that people can, you know, you have the right, as you mentioned, Dennis, you've got the right to organize a union, and all you're doing is exercising your democratic right. They make it damn difficult to exercise your democratic right because, you know, somehow companies have it in their heads that whether you join a union is their business. I mean, I tend to editorialize sometimes in the show. Some of my bias is now showing through for viewers, but I frankly don't think companies ought to have something to say about whether workers join a union. That's for workers to say. I don't remember them asking us whether they should join the Chamber of Commerce or, you know, should they join their manufacturers association. That's generally not something we have anything to say about. But anyway, so much for my bias. Now back to objective reporting.
Right.
So, talk to us a little bit about what are the conditions now inside. The election was just a few days ago. You know, what's going on right now?
I think basically the people that are still working, it's almost like a big burden has been lifted off their shoulders. They know there's some help out there. You know, there are people that were in our corner, there were people that are against us, but I think by and large, people are just happy that it's over with. I mean, this has been a decision, as an independent, we've been struggling with for probably 3-4 years.
Yeah.
And to have finally stepped up to the plate and made the decision, people feel good about themselves. Like you say, you know, it is quite a feeling, not having gone through it before. They are beginning to feel a part of something. And I think, you know, it's a little uneasy. We're kind of sitting back, seeing what the company's gonna do. The company's looking at us and see what we're gonna do. And, you know, we've assured our members over and over, it's business as usual for us. You know, we did this to enhance our representational ability. It shouldn't change how we deal with the company. If anything, it should help us deal with the company because we'll have a better understanding of the bigger picture.
Sure. And I think the company, to give them credit, I don't know know who Hugh Farrington is and these guys, but I, you know, to give them some credit, I imagine they're interested, or ought to be, in how do we work effectively, cooperatively, how do we improve the conditions for everybody? I mean, there's certainly a way for companies to work in a collaborative way with unions to improve and benefit conditions for people on both sides of the table. And I think smart companies do that, and I certainly hope that, you know, Hannaford Brothers is as smart as a company as I think they probably are.
Well, you're right. I think they're a pretty bright company, and they've been very successful. And that offer has been made from the standpoint of the International Union, and I'm sure it's made by Dennis. And I think the company will find that in some areas we're on the same team. One of the areas we're certainly on in this day and age is the health and welfare situation. And during the campaign, they talked about one of their new competitors who's arrived on the scene, mainly Walmart and Sam's. And this union right now is involved in a campaign nationwide to make the Walmart and Kmart and Sam's folks aware of just what the situation is with national health care and make them aware of where their companies stand on that particular issue, because that has an impact on every one of our collective bargaining agreements, as it did in this particular situation here. This union found themselves in a situation that for the first time in many years, they are now involved with copay on their health and welfare premiums. Now, they were able to protect the integrity of the health and welfare insurance that they had, where they're not suffering any loss in benefits, but you know, there they are with the copay of insurance, which is another issue, and it's another issue for another program, I'm sure. but it had an impact, you
Of
know,
course.
and people have come to realize that copay of insurance now is something we just accept, just like people have accepted the idea that you shouldn't be part-time. In our industry, we have to redefine the term full-time and part-time. And some of these new companies say if you work 27 hours a week, you're a full-time employee. You know, where we come from, full-time and 5 days a week, 8 hours a day.
Right.
Maybe some nights involved, maybe some days involved, depending on the industry you're in. So all those things have to come into play. But I think from a standpoint of organization, we're seeing a tremendous change, and I'm sure you are, even here in the state of Maine, where people are starting to open up again. We've done surveys on a pretty regular basis. We encourage it, and we've seen surveys showing that as little as 38 to 40% of people surveyed is close to 7 years ago were interested in joining labor organizations, and that's in excess of a majority at this point of the people interviewed. So there's something going on in this country. Hopefully we'll be at the front of it and be able to build on it. And I hope that in the near future we'll be able to help this local gain the two items they have in front of them, and that's to organize the competition internally.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's certainly got to be something that you guys face all the time and hear, that your wages and benefits, I mean, you mentioned you guys are well paid and so on, and that's great, and you work hard for every nickel, and I'm sure that you do, but you know, the point that's being made by Jim, of course, is that you're being undercut continually by your non-union competition. You know, in our industry, in apparel and textiles, of course, we're being undercut by non-union competition and by, you know, by imports and, you know, people being taken advantage of and exploited in countries from, you know, Mexico to Honduras to China. I mean, it's a constant race to the bottom that we're involved in, unless we're able to sort of turn the tables, as you're suggesting, by organizing a competition and organizing, you know, co-workers and trying to raise people's standards up. How much of that, I mean, I know you guys are just like, you know, you just finished. You just told me how glad you are that the campaign's over, and I don't want you to get started, you know, until, maybe you can wait till tomorrow, but how soon is it that you want to, you know, get about the business of trying to help, you know, expand the idea of organization?
We want to get out immediately. I mean, that's one of the things that weighed heavy on us to choose the UFCW. Their commitment to organizing, commitment to help us organize. That's what drives us. We realize, just as you said, if their competition out there is non-union, that is going to hit us. It hurt us in our contract this time. We saw it as not a progressive contract by any stretch of imagination. And the only way to prevent that is to get out and organize. So we already have people in place that expressed a strong desire to get out and organize. And we're going to work some programs with you know, the international, and that will go on a regular basis. We intend to make that an everyday part of our job.
Whether Bob or Dennis, whether you realize it or not, you're already doing organizing, you're already assisting in organizing. After your affiliation vote, your union went over to New York and started to distribute leaflets and information about the affiliation to other Hannaford warehouse employees, workers. The reason for that is not only do we have to organize the unorganized within a given area where a business may be located, but we also have to, if the business that we represent in one city is unorganized in another city, we must attempt to organize the next city. By organizing that city, we're going to not only be assisting the workers in that unorganized plant, but we'll secure the benefits and conditions of the workers in the organized plant. You know what runaway shops are. It's too easy for an employer to shift its business from a union plant to a non-union plant. Certainly, we're going to attempt organization in non-union locations. And Dennis's local, Bob's local, is assisting us in doing that right now. They're securing, they're attempting to secure job security, if you will, for the membership of the Portland, Maine location. The organization of the Hannaford stores, I think it's probably, it will come about someday. I mean, I don't know when. A lot of it will be the attitude of the workers, but it will not be to our shortcoming or shortfalling of attempting to offer organization. Will be there. We'll be knocking on doors.
And Mike, being a union organizer, you would say the same thing as we do not work for Western Union, so we're not interested in sending telegrams. We have a goal, we have an obligation to organize,
Mhm.
and that'll be accomplished. As Bill said, that was one of the goals of this local union. They've set out a plan, we'll work with that plan. In this particular region, we represent close to 75,000 members. We have a tremendous amount of resources. We have staff that's available to us, and in fact, borrowed staff from local unions to assist in this particular drive, because we wanted local union people to talk to local union people and business agents, organizers, what have you. And we'll continue to do that. And in any time that can be developed. And we've been very successful with that approach, and I think you'll see it happen here. But the goal here initially is to try and organize the internal competition. And I keep stressing that because it's very important to this local union. Whether the company realizes or not, it's a detriment to both of them.
Right.
And that's the direction they're going in. And after that, we'll talk about what's going on the outside.
Sure, okay, well, that's fine. I think, people looking at this show from wherever they happen to be in Maine, work in a whole variety of industries. Many people, of course, in service industries now where, they're predominantly non-union, they don't have any of the protections and don't have any really frame of reference for what we're talking about here. And my way of looking at this is that, you mentioned that these guys are organizing now, and I'd say everybody is, frankly, by telling your story, by getting this message out to people. I don't think you've been invited on, Channel 13 or Channel 6 to do an hour-long show. If they invite you, we'll go head to head with them, of course. But I think it's really important that you're able to get the story out to people in whatever industry. And I, haven't met you guys before today, but my guess is it doesn't really matter to you whether people are what kind of jobs they're doing out there. If people are organizing, if they're organizing into unions, if they're part of a labor movement, that's helping us all.
Oh, sure. And I might point out too that, so there's no misunderstanding here, UFCW has a presence in the state of Maine, and Steve Buzzell,
Sure,
I know is a
yeah.
good friend of yours, and very active with you in the AFL-CIO in the state, represents Local 1445 here, and they have what we refer to as a general charter. This local union right now will have exclusive jurisdiction for the Hannaford Brothers Company and the Shop and Save operations in Maine and New Hampshire. But working together, and Steve has worked real close with these fellows, we will work with anybody who's interested in organization. If someone out there is interested, we're interested in talking to them, and they can reach us through Dennis's number or through the 1445, and I forget the number off the top of my head, but they are listed in the yellow pages in Maine.
Okay.
And I believe they have an 800 number.
Okay, and you're local 1292, and you're in South Portland, and what's your phone number?
799-0762.
799-0762. Call them.
We're not there, leave a message.
Yeah, that's
We'll get
right.
back to you.
All right.
I'd like to make one final point on organization, and you could almost, it goes hand in hand, organization and trend setting. The organized are the trend setters. This particular plant that we were speaking of it this morning, all the unorganized operations that operate around the Hannaford, Portland location, they base their structures, their wage structures, on the nearing a contract rate that's been negotiated by an organized location. I mean, needless to say, you and I know that they don't receive the full complement or the full economic condition of a contract in a non-organized place, but the people of Portland that are less fortunate, that do not have union representation, can be counting some blessings and thanking the old independent union, which is now UFCW 1292, for the conditions they currently do enjoy. Because the conditions that they may enjoy are a direct result of negotiated conditions by Local 1292.
That's quite correct. It's an important point to make because in Portland, and I'm looking forward, hopefully, to working with you guys in the Portland area. We have a labor council in Portland. There are a number of unions, AFL-CIO unions in the Portland area. We are we try to be pretty active around issues like you mentioned the fight for health care. That's something we do a lot of here in the state of Maine, and a whole host of labor issues that we're involved with because we sort of view it's not maybe organizing new members specifically for Act 2 or for UFCW or for any individual union, but that together, we're the only way we're all going to benefit is if we're all moving together in the same direction. so I hope to see your smiling faces there.
Well, that's one of the good things that has happened to us over the last 3 years since we started talking to UFCW. The Maine AFL-CIO has extended open arms to us. We've attended a lot of training, you know, been involved in a lot of different projects they have going. And just having the comfort of knowing there are other people going through the same struggle out there really helps, and it goes a long ways. It's enabled us to see some of the benefits that can be obtained by organizing, by growing our union.
Sure.
And I hope that continues, and I plan to be around for a
Good,
while.
all right.
And if I could, in our attempt, we didn't have a lot of time. We sought a lot of support from the Maine State AFL-CIO, the Maine State Employees Union, and several others, and some we missed. And I think we should publicly acknowledge what the Maine AFL-CIO did on our behalf, what the MSCA did on our behalf, and I'm sure I'm missing a couple of the others. And also, the state of New Hampshire and Vermont, one juncture the company was concerned about them being outsiders, and of course we pointed out to the company that in all those states, they operate stores, and we want everybody to be aware of the fact that there is an AFL-CIO union now that represents the warehouse employees in Shop and Save, and someday all the people in Shop and Save. And in a very short period of time, as soon as these fellows can get their act together, I'm sure their applications will be forthcoming to the Maine AFL-CIO, and at least at Central Body in Portland, and maybe others in the state. And I'm sure Mike will help you with that, because he's.
Oh, don't you worry about that. Don't you worry, we'll get off camera here in a couple minutes, guys, and we'll sign you up for more things than you knew you could sign for. But in seriousness, it really, there are a lot of, I mean, it's not just opportunities, there's a heck of a lot of needs, frankly, that people have out there, and they need some leadership, and they need some inspiration. And I think, I mean, the reason that you guys are here is that you're providing, right now, you know, you're taking center stage in terms of providing some inspiration and encouragement to working people that, you know, hey, you don't, I mean, that it's possible for people to organize together and you know, and improve their conditions, and stand up to companies and say, look, we've got a right to be, you know, recognized, and our independence and our ability to make our own decisions has got a right to be respected, and you did that. And again, I'm not just throwing bouquets around, I just think it's important. Unfortunately, we don't have enough stories like this. It's not every day of the week that you pick up the Portland Press Herald and learn about people, you know, successfully organizing a union. And you know, you have some things to teach other people, and you're gonna be called upon, I'm sure, to help.
I mean, we had a lot of good people inside. We had some very strong stewards that came under a lot of attack, you know, whether it was from the company or our own people, just because they didn't understand in full what was going on. We had a lot of people that had never been involved with the independent at all, and they'd been there 15, 20, 25 years, came out to help us.
Is that right?
And said, hey, it's time that people stood up. And I can't emphasize enough the feeling when that vote went through, what a sense of accomplishment that was, not just for myself, but for all of us in our organization. Because, like I say, it takes a lot from people to stand up and go for what they know is right.
Yeah, I'm sure it does, and I'm sure the kind of campaign that you went through, even though these guys could have told you ahead of time, and I'm sure did, that, you know, to expect this and that, there were probably some nervous moments, huh?
Oh, yeah, well, I think the advantage to us was that we had just gone through it a couple of years back. So we knew pretty much what to expect. It wasn't like it was all new. And again, what Dennis said about the stewards and the rest of the e-board, without them, I think we wouldn't have been able to do it. I mean, they supplied us with a real strong base and a good backbone to go ahead and be able to affiliate with UFCW.
But we're convinced that whether they were pro or con, in favor of or against the affiliation, that all the members, all the good members of Local 1262 will unite or reunite and make this an even better and stronger local union for Portland.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's this is the coming together period, and I'm sure you guys are in the process now of, you know, reaching out to those people who, you know, the feelings I'm sure ran very high, both within the membership and in terms of relations with the company. And I think it sounds to me like you guys are certainly doing the responsible thing. And not that it's going to be easy, but I'm sure you're going to make it. So
there's a lot of room out there for everybody to be involved. I mean, that's the whole basis that our union's based on. It's a democracy. If you have a situation or a problem, or you have a voice you want to exercise, come on in. We can deal with all.
Yeah. Well, that certainly is the way it should be. And one of the messages for people here ought to be that, you know, it is a democracy. I mean, the union's set up to be a democratic organization at work, so workers have the right to vote, to make decisions. but the hard facts of the matter are that for most workers in this society, you know, the way the laws have been interpreted and administered and the ways in which companies have injected themselves into this process has meant that really those democratic rights for most people have been squashed. It's damn hard for people to organize a union because, you know, the decks are stacked against them pretty well. And, you know, we're in the process now, and, you know, some of the things that I'm sure these guys have been involved in, and you're going to be involved in, I would predict, is the effort to reform our labor laws and to provide an opportunity for workers to exercise their democratic rights. We have a whole lot of things on our agenda here of ways that we need to improve the organization process so it's easier for people who want to join a union to be able to exercise the right to do so, to keep companies' noses out of our business or out of workers' business and not be able to unfairly affect elections now. And we have, you know, that gets to be a political issue, and good Senator Cohen, who may be watching tonight, is, Senator, we asked you to be here last week. I know you were unable to join us for last week's show. The invitation still stands. I hope you can join us one of these days. We need to talk.
We'll second that motion, Senator.
With all due respect, I think there are a lot of politicians, frankly, who are not, I mean, they're not close enough to the workplace to really know what's going on out there. I think a lot of people have the mistaken view that, you know, it's a simple matter of if people want to join a union, they can join a union. If they don't, they don't. And, you know, everybody should get along. You know, can't we just all get along? Well, it's not quite that simple. And so your story, and although you guys had a leg up. You had your own independent union. I don't know what the struggle was to get that years ago, but for whatever reason, you've had it. But now taking it one step further, even the relatively modest step, and with no disrespect meant, but the issue of affiliating from an independent to a national union, as you had said earlier, is not, Bill, the issue of organizing. It's, you know, affiliating and gaining some negotiating strength. Well,
Yes.
it's a much more difficult challenge for people to exercise their rights under the law now. So we're going to need everybody's help in making that happen and making that possible for other workers.
But,
Okay, well, we're signed you up for lots of things to do. We have about 2 minutes before we wrap. I just wanted to ask if there's any last comments, Bill, that you'd like to make before you go back to Washington and
No,
your opportunity to speak to the people of Maine. Here you go.
That's a large opportunity, big opportunity, my goodness. I would just suggest to you, whether it be positive or negative, your sympathy to organized labor is to keep an open mind and understand that organized labor, as I once said in this meeting or in this session, it's a trend-setting organization. It affects you whether you're organized or non-union, like it or not. For the most part, I would suggest to you, or I submit to you, that organized labor is a benefit to all workers, and it's directly reflected in your weekly income.
Jim?
Well, I'm a Maine boy. They took the boy out of Maine. I've been in and out of Maine for years. I will be working very closely with this local union, and I'm looking forward to that. I echo most of Bill's sentiments too, that organized labor has been good for the state of Maine. It's still good for the state of Maine. And again, if anybody's interested, we're in the yellow pages. We stand ready to help any worker in the state of Maine without jumping in other people's jurisdiction, but we're here to help anybody that's interested.
Good. And Bob?
I just want to say pretty much that if there's anybody out there that are involved with their unions, they belong to a union, to get more involved, donate an hour, 2 hours a week. It's really going to help them out in the long run and keep this labor movement going and going and going.
Okay, I appreciate that. And El Presidente.
Well, I'd just like to close with say, you know, we're nothing more than workers helping workers, and that was the key to our success, I think. If you're out there in the workplace and something isn't right, just don't sit back and let it go by. You have rights, exercise them, talk to your buddy, talk to the person next to you, and eventually you can do the right thing. And to me, the only way to go is go union, and the more that do it, the better off we're all going to be.
Okay, well, great. Well said is right. Well, I want to thank all of you guys for coming over this afternoon. It's really a pleasure for me to have an opportunity to talk with people who are doing the kind of good work that you're all doing. And I appreciate you taking the time and sharing your thoughts with those of us who are here at Cavanaugh's Corner and people around the state who have an opportunity to watch and listen and learn. So,
Like, we want to thank you for all the effort you put into trying to get us
Track us down.
It wasn't
the
easy.
story
It wasn't
behind the
easy.
story. That's right. Well, we'll have a special show on that one. Anyway, I want to thank our viewers for tuning in. This, as I said, has been another edition of Cavanaugh's Corner, the award-winning labor talk show here. And so you guys didn't know that we won awards, did you? We're the only labor talk show. We gave ourselves an award. Anyway, we certainly invite you to tune in again next week, same time, same station in most of your locations. And we'll be talking about other issues of importance to working people here in the state of Maine. So, once again, thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much.